Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Tom Clark. I'm your 2020 president for the Spokane Association of Realtors. Welcome to the fifth weekly President's Roundtable. Today's guest, well, first of all, let me tell everybody this is going to be recorded. So if you have an issue with that, you probably don't want to be online, or at least be recorded. So do know that this is going to be recorded for our members' benefit later, so they can come back and review it and poke fun at the rest of us and things like that. So a couple of announcements to make. This past week, your board of directors passed and accepted a COVID-19 notice for the use for you and your buyers and sellers. We look at it as a more of a piece for you to be able to educate your clients on the procedures and the things that we have to do in order to follow the protocols and protect everybody as much as possible in this time we're in. Latest news, and I'll bet you Darren's got some more information on this, so is that the looks like residential construction is going to get started back up here before too long. So we're kind of excited about that. That was just an announcement made today by the governor's office. Our guest today, Susie Levine, she's the commissioner of the Employment Security Department for Washington since 2018. Susie, from 2014 to 2017, was the U.S. ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and I'd rather she spend a lot more time talking about that today than real estate related issues, but we're here for you guys, not for her or me, so we'll just stick to the script. Also with us today is Steve Scranton with Washington Trust. Steve's been the Senior Vice President, Investment Economist for Washington Trust. He's been in the investment business for 30 years, and we're hoping that he'll share with us a little bit of economic insight, possibly polish up his crystal ball and tell us a little bit about what we can anticipate for the future, if that's even possible. And then and Susie has with her, by the way, I forgot to mention, Susie has with her Joy Adams, who is the Employment Insurance Quality Assurance Manager. And she'll be helping us with the Q&A as well, also after Susie's presentation. To close it out today, I've asked, we also have, gee whiz, I'm having all kinds of troubles. Corey Jo Anderson with Windermere North is going to share with us some of her insights as far as successfully applying for the pandemic unemployment assistance. So that'll be kind of fun. It's doable, let's put it that way. It's doable. So if you've had some challenges, we're going to try and come out of this today with some success. And then Mike Crowley, I invited Mike Crowley to visit with me at the end of our hour today, just to discuss changes in the real estate marketplace, survival of a changing economy and a changing market, and some of the tools and the attitudes, I guess, that are necessary for us to do that. So please help me welcome Susie Levine. Levine or Levine?
Levine, rhymes with wine.
Darn. Levine.
You got it right the first time. It was good. Thank you.
One in a row.
It's all right. Hey, well, first off, I'll just, especially given the role that you all play as realtors, I will share an interesting point from my time in Switzerland. So as ambassador, you get to stay in a wonderful residence and represent the United States. Frankly, think of it more as like a catering hall with an apartment above it. And in most Western European countries, those properties were given to the United States to thank them after World War II, or in some cases they cost $1. Switzerland, because it is a neutral country, was not assisted by the United States during World War II, was not liberated by the United States during World War II, and did not give the United States a free property or a $1 property. And it is a property dating back to 1912. Actually, it is based on a foundation that goes back many hundreds of years earlier. And I believe the cost was probably around $200,000 in the 1940s and 1950s when it was acquired by the United States. Just putting that out there. Little nugget, and you can find that information on the U.S. Embassy Bern website about Blumen Rain is the name of the property. So to the situation today, what I'd like to do is to take you through kind of where we are today and then talk through, especially given that many of your members are individuals who are self-employed workers or independent contractors, talk through some of the steps that they may want to take and the experience that they may have in applying for unemployment assistance. Knowing that you all are big numbers people, I want you to understand the volume that we have been working with in our efforts. And I want to thank you all for staying home and staying healthy. That effort has helped our state flatten the curve and has kept more people alive. Thank you. And that persists. And we are looking closely at the health indices to make sure that we do not have another bump up, which would then cause us to need to clamp back down with regards to the stay home and stay healthy order. We track something called initial claims as well as ongoing claims for unemployment, and we report them weekly, or we report them with a week's lag. So last week's numbers that we reported this week indicated how dynamic this crisis has been. So for example, we reported that last week, the week ending April 18th, we had 82,000 initial claims. That's the 5th highest week ever recorded in the history of Washington State's unemployment insurance program. The highest was the week ending March 28th. It was down, but the ongoing claims, the total number of claims, continued to rise. And what that speaks to is pent-up demand for claims of the expanded unemployment insurance program, and I'll talk to that in a moment, as well as the fact that few people are heading back to work, which is why you have the cumulative increase. So our total number of claims was 605,000. But that news was eclipsed by what happened since then and its impact to Washingtonians, our economy, and our state. The late Saturday night, we enabled 3 key provisions from the Federal CARES Act that expanded eligibility for unemployment assistance to those previously ineligible. That's including independent contractors, self-employed workers, and those with fewer than 680 hours. Others as well, but those are the biggest buckets. It also increased the weekly benefit by $600 per person, and that is retroactive to March 29th and runs through July 25th if people remain on unemployment assistance. And we extended benefits by 13 weeks, and that too is for anybody on any form of unemployment benefit. The response that we received to this release of this was unbelievable. It was staggering. It was immediate, and it dwarfed all previous records. To give you a gauge, while I can't share specific claims numbers yet until next week's announcement, I mentioned that the week ending March 28th was the highest week that we've had on record. That was 182,000 claims. That was 7 times the highest peak week in the 2008-2009 recession. Within 36 hours of our release Saturday night, we had eclipsed that peak week of 182,000 claims. So we were having a hard time receiving all the traffic that we were getting in, and people were very frustrated, and we acknowledge that, and we are so sorry for that experience. And yet many people, a record number, a historic number, were still able to get through and file their claims. Part of what we believe led to that huge rush at the outset was people's concern that the money would run out. I want to reassure you, the money will not run out. This is not the Paycheck Protection Plan. This is not other components of the CARES Plan. This is unemployment benefits. They will not run out, and people will not miss out. You can backdate your claim, and we will pay retroactive to the date of eligibility. So this week, to give you a sense of how much money we were able to distribute through unemployment benefits, in total since the end of the week of March 6th, which was the beginning of this crisis, so the total since then has been almost $1.4 billion in unemployment benefits delivered out into Washington State, into Washingtonians' pockets. Just this week alone, it's nearly $900 million distributed. So I had said before our release on Saturday night to set people's expectations that it would be a clunky experience. We worked around the clock to get that update to our system set to go, but we knew that it's a complex process and that it would not be the smoothest user experience. But we were willing to make that trade-off in order to get money in people's pockets. And I would argue that those folks who are receiving that $900 million this week are okay with that trade-off. But we did make a tremendous amount of information available that remains on the site that we still recommend people use, with an application checklist so that you can be ready to apply. with a guidebook that tells you, here are some of the places that you really need to pay extra attention as you answer certain questions. And where we have a list of, here are some of the recommended documents that you would upload. So for example, there was a question already in the chat that asked about basically what information do I need to put in, or the question around, are we going to look at net earnings for the tax year? Well, one of the challenges that we know that realtors who are self-employed have is that they do not submit wages and hours to us. What you need to do instead is you go through the unemployment insurance application, you'll be deemed ineligible, and then you will click on a link to the COVID-19 PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. When you click on that link, that will then set you into an additional application process. And at the end, you'll need to upload your wage documents so that we can know what your weekly benefit should be. Those documents, the gold standard is your 2019 tax return. But other things like 1099s or a Schedule C, something that tells us your name and your 2019 wages, will be able to indicate to us what your weekly benefit amount should be. That verification needs to be done by hand, one by one. However, in order to balance getting you or those that you know your money quickly with protecting taxpayers from fraud, what we are doing out of the gate is authorizing the minimum weekly benefit amount plus the $600. And then when we verified it, we will then retroactively pay any difference in that weekly benefit amount that you've earned. So that minimum weekly benefit amount is $235. So out of the gate, you would get $835 per week. It would then be retroactive to your date of eligibility. So if it was April 1st, we would pay that retroactive. And then once we verify your wage documents, we would pay more if there is more that you had earned and the weekly benefit amount is higher for 2019 for 2019 wages. I can go into that in more detail if anybody needs it, but it's also laid out in our website. So that is the experience for those. And a couple of key things. If you have already applied and gone through and you're filing weekly claims, the other thing that we want to talk about is the wave of weekly claims that we expect to start this Sunday. And that's because we have, again, a staggering number of weekly claims eligible to be filed starting this Sunday. We're preparing for almost 900,000, maybe even 1 million, to be filed starting this Sunday. And I use that word starting really deliberately because there is a misconception that weekly claims need to be filed only on Sunday. That is not true. They can be filed anytime from Sunday through Saturday, and it's 24/7. The ideal way to do it is online through the eServices account. There is also through our IVR, through our phone line, that can be done as well. We are working hard to expand capacity in both of those channels in order to receive those weekly claims. However, if everybody comes at 12:01 Sunday morning, then it will be very difficult for people to get through and for people to be processed for their weekly claims. So in addition to increasing our capacity in terms of our pipe, we are also asking people to spread out their claims filing. And this is a very exceptional ask. But for those who are not in a dire financial situation, we are asking them to wait until Tuesday or later in the week to file their weekly claims. We are also recommending that people file very early or very late in the day when traffic is much lower. We know that that's a crazy ask, but people do it all the time, and we've seen Washingtonians and people around the globe really stepping up to help one another. Think of this as a way to help your friends and your neighbors so that those who are in deep and immediate need, can get their claims processed first. The money will not run out and you will not miss out. It just may be that you receive the money a couple of days later into your accounts. The other thing is, if you're filing for the first time, we do recommend using direct deposit. That processing time is anywhere from 24 to 48 hours from approved and initial claims filed to getting the money into your account. Otherwise, it's about an average of 7 to 10 days. So again, the materials up on our website, esd.wa.gov, really outline how to run more smoothly through this process. The more prepared you are, the smoother it will go, and the faster you will get your money, or those that you know will be able to get their claims filed and approved and paid. So with that, I am going to pause and answer questions that folks may have. And there have been a lot coming in the chat, and I will need to put on my reading glasses in order to read those. I apologize that I now no longer look like I don't need reading glasses, but I do.
Susie, my name's Darren Watkins. I'm going to help serve as the kind of the moderator here and help guide you through some of these things. One of the first questions that came up for us was, what happens when we can't talk to someone? We've got a lot of realtors trying to call through. The first question was, first off, is there a number specific for independent contractors? Or two, what's your advice for people who have been trying to get through?
So a few things just to give people a gauge on the phone calls. We had 1,000% increase in our call volumes in the first 2 weeks of this crisis. On Monday alone, we had 100 calls per second coming in, 100 calls per second. We are doing everything we can to point people to the website first, where they can be more self-service. 60% of those calls that came in were question calls, most of which were answered on our website already. So first thing to do is actually go to the website, and we just launched today a chatbot that will allow you also to answer your questions and type them in and see if we've got the answer that way. But many of the answers are up on the website, and we've done a lot to dramatically improve that. We also now have a separate questions line from our claims line. There are some people who don't have digital capacity and must file their claims through the phone. We're doing everything we can from an equity standpoint to make sure that they can separate out and call with their claims. Plus, there may be certain situations where somebody can only get that situation remedied via a claims agent versus a questions line. So we have both a questions line, which is separate from the claims line. So what we don't recommend is people who just have a simple question calling us. Please look through the materials first and see if we've answered that question first, and then call our questions line. And if they can't answer, then it can go to a claims agent. So that's what I would recommend. We do not have a contractor specific person or set of people who are answering those questions. That has not been established, and nor will it, again, from an equity standpoint. We have those two pools of questions versus claims lines. But again, ideally, many of the questions that people have or issues into which people are running can be answered online. We also have very robust social media posting that we're doing to inform folks. And my team is listening through that. If they're seeing a general trend of, gosh, a bunch of people have run into this, then we bring that back and we get that resolved. I'll give you a very specific example. Very early on, before the Federal CARES Act was passed, we were doing a lot to expand eligibility for unemployment insurance. One of the things that we did was we allowed those businesses doing standby to include their part-time workers in that. Standby allows businesses to basically say, we're going to hire you back. It's like a furlough. We're going to hire you back, but you don't need to do a job search. Out of the gate, we passed that rule, but we didn't have the software updated for another 4 or 5 days. And so people were using the website and saying they were part-time workers, but they were then getting denied on the website, but they weren't actually getting denied. We were circling back with them and letting them know whether they were approved based on their number of hours. And so we needed to communicate that. We heard about that primarily first through social media, and then we communicated that through social media and through the press as well. That's an example as well. Does that help answer that question, Darren?
We've been hosting a number of webinars on the state side and also in trying to help realtors get through this. But along the way, as you know, because it's such a tricky process, it has been difficult to try to fix mistakes. So if just to say hypothetically, I'm a realtor and I've gone through made a mistake on the form, how do I go about fixing that? Because it really sounds like it's a hard 22. I've got a mistake I'd like to go back and fix, but there isn't any way to reach someone to help me walk me through that. What would you recommend?
So first and foremost, I do recommend using the application checklist and making sure people take their time so they don't make the mistakes up front. I know that that's that's kind of a harsh answer in that respect. But we actually, in our materials, have identified the top places that people make mistakes. And so going through there and knowing, oh, okay, wait, I'm going to pause before I answer this. Or before people submit, we review. Here's all of the answers that you gave. Are you ready to submit? Do you need to change one of those? So it's really, 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 I can't emphasize it enough. So worth taking that time and knowing how, you guys know how many IKEA or otherwise broken bookshelves there are when people didn't follow instructions, right? I've done enough of those in my day. I'm better than the instruction manuals. I can figure it out. Take a look at the materials that we have first and foremost. If you've made a mistake, a few things. One is, in many cases, right, when you're not under so much load, it can just be solved. It can be like spackle. You don't really have that crack. Boom, here you go. And we can solve it. But with such load, people do need to, it takes more time in terms of adjudication and fixing some of those. My team now, though, is analyzing where can we look at bigger buckets where we know that there are mistakes. I'll give you an example. There's a box that says, have you received retirement income? Well, that doesn't mean that you won't receive benefits, but it means that if you are receiving an ongoing pension, we would reduce your weekly benefit amount knowing that that's part of your ongoing income that you have coming into your life. But if you are somebody who got a severance package, does that count as retirement income? Some people are checking yes, some people don't know what to check, and it requires adjudication. So we're looking to see, is there a way for us to en masse resolve those so that we can address where there might be thousands in those mistake buckets.
Sure.
But otherwise, people do need to call, or we are working on tackling those and having our adjudicators do that fact finding and circling back. We also recommend people look in their spam filters because they might have received an email asking them for more information. And in some cases, that mail might land in their spam filter and they really need to reply in a timely way.
One of the biggest challenges I know has been that there's a spot, for example, that says, did you work for an employer? And there was a misconception because most of our realtors, while they work specifically in an office, they're also in a place where they really are just self-employed. Unfortunately, they're clicking that box saying they work for someone, and that's kind of kicking them out. That's a spot to watch for. The other challenge has to be with there are all of the different flexibilities people have. For example, we have realtors who are in an S corp, and most of the boxes are designed for being able to fill out with the 940 or the 941 for being a sole proprietor, or maybe they work two jobs where they've got W-2 income over here, but they've got 1099 MK there, or maybe they're working in two states with Washington and Idaho. That's a lot for one system like yours to try to capture. Any advice you might offer for them?
Apply. Well, seriously, I mean, we should be very proud here in Washington State. In 2017, we rolled out a modernized system as opposed to the other states that are now wrestling with COBOL mainframes. And part of why we rolled this out last week and not earlier was because we integrated this pandemic unemployment assistance, this expansion of benefits into our existing system, as opposed to standing something up separately. And I'm pretty sure we're the only state that has done that. And I think we're the first state to roll out all three of the provisions from the CARES Act to our Washingtonians. And what that allows us to do is, as people go through the application, they'll put in their information. If there are hours that are filed for them on record, then they would have those. And if they're not up to 680, then they would go through and fill out the pandemic unemployment assistance application. They would then add in their wages from their independent contractor, their 1099s or their Schedule Cs. They would put those wages in there, and we would tabulate the entire thing together. And like I said, they would get at the outset, to get money in their pocket, the minimum weekly benefit amount. And then we are going through and doing that wage verification for every single one of those. In fact, we have almost 700 people from within our agency who don't typically work on this, myself included, who have been trained now and have been doing wage verification to look at these documents to then determine what it could and should be for those individuals for their weekly benefit amount. But out of the gate, they'll get the minimum weekly benefit amount plus the $600. Now, the complexity comes in is if it's somebody who has more than 680 hours, so they already qualify for regular unemployment insurance, and or they have not been laid off from that job, they're trying to get it from their supplemental job, then they probably will be ineligible and or need some level of adjudication. I also have, you'll see a web notice on the e-services form. So when they apply, they'll see in their account the information to click on that link. And it is perfectly fine to apply for both regular unemployment insurance and the new pandemic unemployment assistance. It does not disqualify you. And there are certain conditions. We will do the back end reconciliation of which source is providing you with that unemployment assistance for that lost work.
So make sure I've got this process clear, because we're having people apply and then get denied for unemployment. And then what happens if they goof that up and they'd still like to apply for the is there a specific way to apply just for pandemic unemployment?
Totally. And I suspect that a lot of people applied before last Saturday and were deemed ineligible, or even if they applied since then, they were deemed ineligible and didn't realize, oh, I need to click on that next link.
Right.
It's kind of like you're playing a video game where the next level's been opened up because you completed part of the process. And so, not that you play video games, not that I play video games, but it's something where if you applied before, so you've set up an account, which if you haven't set up an account, please watch the video on how to do so, because that is another area that people run into a lot of challenges. But once you've set up an account and you've applied and you were ineligible, there will now be a link in your e-services account to go in and apply for COVID-19 PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And it's that is what is available for independent contractors and self-employed workers, or those who are otherwise had been ineligible for unemployment insurance and were impacted by COVID-19. You do need to demonstrate that you've been impacted by COVID-19. And we have in there a checklist where you need to say, yes, I was impacted, and it's got the, what does impacted mean? So people will go in and see that. I suspect a number of the people here were having those issues where they had been ineligible previously because we did not yet have it live. And the time frames were, it passed Congress and was signed into law March 27th. It went into effect March 29th. But again, we were working night and day to get the software done so that we could serve people. When you have situations like the Oso landslide, where this kind of unemployment assistance is available, but it's a relatively small population, you can do it manually, and it doesn't take the integration into a larger software system. But with the magnitude of what we are seeing and what we knew would happen, we had to do it in a way that would be more automated. And that's why we needed to take that extra time between March 29th and now, this past Saturday, in order to integrate it and write the code into our system and get up and be ready for serving Washingtonians. And again, we know that many people have not been able to get through. They should be able to now. The bandwidth has been expanded and we've had much better performance on the website. And we do know that the phone lines have continued to be overwhelmed, but we are working on increasing that, as well as we've done a lot more in terms of self-sufficiency around information that's on the website.
You certainly have your hands full, and we appreciate the time that you spend here today. My takeaway from this is, before you start, make sure you pull down the booklet and take a close look at it. Yes. If you make a mistake or there's a problem, be patient, because there's a lot of people in the same boat as you are trying to get through the same phone lines. Is there any other advice you might want to offer before we let you go? I
would look at the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance application checklist. So in the website, just go to esd.wa.gov, and they will see an unemployment link, and then they will see self-employed and independent contractors. And it steps them through, and it's worth taking the time. Like in that application checklist, it tells you the best documents to have for when you need to upload wage documents. And having looked through plenty of people's documents, including realtors, I can tell you it's quite a mix that people are submitting. So please take the time to do that, because when you do that, we can do it much more quickly. There were those that was like, okay, there's their Schedule C, here's their information, done, good. And then there are those who are like, really? Huh.
Let's do that.
That's going to need to get a little bit more people looking at that and verifying that and circling back with those individuals, and that's going to take longer. That said, again, we're getting the money out right away at the minimum weekly benefit amount, but I suspect that your folks want to get the full amount and not just the minimum.
Susie, let's do the website one more time. That was esd.wa.gov.
.wa.gov.
Great.
Fantastic. Susie, I can't tell you how much we truly appreciate you taking some time. I know how busy you are and how things have been just overwhelming for your office. This will be one for the record books. And you've done a marvelous job getting us to this place. So thank you so much.
Well, and let me ask you one other question. I know that there's a ton of questions that have come in. If you all want to essentially aggregate those questions and send them to us from a policy standpoint, my policy team can help answer them, and we can get back to you and you can distribute those out to your audience so that they have those. And then some of them may make their way into our frequently asked questions, because there's a lot of really good ones coming through, and I'd love to be able to answer all of them. But unfortunately, obviously, we've run out of time. So, but I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, I want to thank you all so much for staying home and staying healthy and keeping people alive. We will get through this, and we will get through this together. Thank you for your patience and your grace as we manage this incredible demand and work to help stabilize our economy.
We'll take you up on that. We will send you those questions, and we look forward to seeing what kind of answers we can get back. We actually have some other folks here on the panel we wanted to revisit here. And Susie, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Take care.
We've had a couple of realtors who've had some success doing all of this. We'll talk real quick with Corey Joe Anderson. Corey, if you're there, walk us through your experience and tell me how it worked for you and what you think any secrets that you saw as you found your way through the system. Is she still here?
You know what, I'm gonna actually can I make one more pitch, Darren?
Absolutely. Sure.
So we have 83,000 people who should be filing weekly claims who haven't yet. That to me indicates that there are a lot of people who don't know about this thing called weekly claims. When you file and when you apply for unemployment assistance, you need to do an initial claim, and then you need to do weekly claims in order to get your benefits on a weekly basis. So as a reminder to folks, file your weekly claims and keep filing them. It's very important to do in order to be able to get the money. Otherwise, you won't get the money. And we've had a lot of people saying, I applied 4 weeks ago and was approved, but I haven't gotten my money yet. Well, there's 83,000 of them who should be filing weekly claims who have not. So that's one other pitch for folks to be able to get their money.
One quick question has to do with taxes, because the tax deadlines are so crazy. What do you recommend for people who haven't quite filled out their 2019s? Do they just go off 218, or should they file first and then come to you?
218 is not going to work because that doesn't tell us their wages for the last 12 months. We need to know their wages, and we do have the very specific documents posted up on the website. It ranges from a Schedule C to 1099s, things that help us understand how much they made in 2019 are ideal. We do not recommend using the Department of Revenue B&O documents, but 1099s, Schedule Cs, K1s, those all are sufficient for our review.
That sounds great. Good advice. Susie, thank you again for your time. It's been great.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and have a peaceful weekend. Wash your hands.
We're going to shift gears real quick. Steve Scranton is here. He is a vice president with Washington Mutual, and he's here to talk with us briefly about the economy, where we're at, and where things are going. I mean, Steve, from your position, from your seat, this must be one of the most wild changes that you've seen, at least in the last few decades.
It would definitely be a who would have ever thought. Just quick clarification, though, I'm with Washington Trust Bank.
My apologies. I apologize for that.
We have been in business for 118 years, and our doors are still open. So, to give you my economic updates for you guys, I always, some of you who have heard me speak before, you'll recognize it, but for everybody else, I always try and keep my discussions at what I call street level that makes sense and not hit you with a bunch of economic gibberish. So I've always told people, if you want to understand what's going on with the economy, you start with jobs, because jobs are what create income, and income is the fuel that allows consumers to spend. And consumer spending accounts for 70% of our GDP growth. So to tag on to what you just heard, I'll give you some of the actual realities of what we see. So if we could have the first slide up, what I wanted to show you, I'll give a second for the slide to come up. Next one after that, please. So what this is showing you in real life terms, this is first starting on a national level, saying what have these initial jobless claims that Sue was just talking about, what do they look like? And as you can see, starting back March 21st, when we got our first jobless claims record number, and this was, as she had indicated, it was 7 to 8 times more. Normally what we would see for jobless claims at a national level is 218,000 people applying for jobless claims each week. And yet we had 3,307,000 people that first week. It skyrocketed up to over 6 million. And then now you can see the trend is starting to move down. But the reality is, over those 5 weeks on a national basis, we've had 26,485,000 people put out of work applying for jobless claims. That is so far out of the scope of what you would normally look at. It's not even worth showing you the previous, where we stood during the financial crisis or even the Great Recession, because this has happened so quickly because the decision made to essentially shut down our economy to be able to battle this virus. If we go to a state level, if we go to the next slide, she gave you the weekly numbers, but this is showing you now the cumulative for that standpoint, where we're at over 680,000 people who have applied for jobless claims. And if we take it to the last level, which is for Spokane County itself, go to the next slide, we can see that the picture still looks the same, the numbers are just smaller. But we have seen that same story, that we've had over 45,000 people filing for unemployment insurance claims, and that is before the new round where we will have the people who've never been able to apply before. So to give you that perspective, what we have done with that, when I look at the actual, how many people did we have employed total in February before March came around, we wiped off essentially 17% of our workforce with the shutting down of the economy and putting people out of work. And that number is going to grow now, as she's already indicated, huge surge now that the sole proprietors, the independent contractors, the freelance workers, the gig economy type of workers can file for their claims. We're going to see that number grow even more. So from a realistic standpoint, that tells you where we stand with the economy, of the huge impact that we've had there. What I've tried to emphasize with people, though, is this is basically looking in the rearview mirror, because this has already happened. We can't change it. We can't reverse it. But I've always said you need to look at the numbers so we know what our starting point is of what's the damage that's been done and how do we move forward from here. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on the negative side there, because that is the reality. What I would tell you from an economic perspective, we are probably going to be looking at within the next, probably by April's job report, employment report, May at the latest, we're probably going to be seeing both at a local level and a national level, unemployment rates in the 15 to 20% range. To give you the perspective, during the Great Depression, the peak was 24%. So it shows you how swift this has been, completely different circumstances, but that's what we could be looking at. We'll also be looking at the fact when we get our economic report for the US, the gross domestic product for the second quarter, and that won't be out until July. So that's down the road, but I'm just giving you advance warning that we know that's going to be a bad number. And part of the problem with the US compared to the rest of the world reports their quarterly economic growth on a quarterly basis. So you might see in a regular time period when the US reports 3% GDP growth, the rest of the world might be reporting something more like 1.2%, because they're only giving you the quarter. The US made the decision back in history, I couldn't give you the reason why, but we decided to report ours on an annualized basis. So when we say 3%, that wasn't the actual growth in that quarter. That was that quarter's growth annualized over the 4 quarters. So what we are probably going to see is that GDP in the second quarter probably fell somewhere between 10 to 15%. That means you could well see a GDP report from the US saying that our GDP growth fell by 30 to as much as 60%. And a lot of people are going to be shocked and go, oh my gosh. And I just keep trying to say, That's not the real number. That's the annualized number. The real number is bad enough if we fell by 10%, because the worst quarter that we had on an annualized basis during the great financial crisis that everybody thought was one of the worst things that we'd had in history, the annualized growth rate, the worst one we had during that time period, was 8.4% negative. And now we're talking on an equivalent basis, negative 30 to negative 60%. So it just gives you the scope of how swift and how quickly, when you make the decision that you need to shut down your economy to contain the virus. I mean, and we can debate all day back and forth, people have their own opinions, but it was a choice of saving lives or saving jobs. And the decision made was saving lives. So now we've had this impact. So let's flip over now, because like I said, that's like looking through the rearview mirror and seeing all the damage that was created by some disaster. In this case, an economic disaster. So let's go to the next slide, because what I want to highlight there, actually, no, stay where we are. Oh, wait, thank you. That's the right slide. Sorry. Go back. Thank you. What I wanted to say is if we look out the windshield as if we're driving down the road rather than looking out the river mirror, there is definitely help is on the way. As you've already heard from the unemployment insurance claims, they are getting those processed. People are going to be getting their money anywhere from, like they indicated, 48 hours to 10 days or so. From the other standpoint, from a national standpoint, what I would just try and remind you is we have had over $3 trillion in financial aid authorized by Congress with the legislation that they've passed. Again, we deal with the bureaucracy of government that sometimes that takes a while to get processed, but we've definitely seen, like for the Paycheck Protection Program, that money got dispersed fairly quickly if you were able to get processed and get the application through. And now we have that renewed again. They'll be opening that up. Probably, we're still waiting for the final word from the SBA, but it'll probably either be today or tomorrow, so that we're able to help more small businesses trying to maintain their payrolls. But we also have had almost $7 trillion in lending programs offered by the Federal Reserve. So those are just record-setting, kind of mind-blowing numbers compared to what we have seen even during the financial crisis. So that is just saying that it's not a case that nothing's happening, although it's frustrating when you need that help that it's not happening as quickly as you'd like. For the state of Washington, you know, they've rolled out their Working Small Business Grant Program. Spokane County has been a beneficiary, being a big enough county that they received $90 million from the legislation that Congress passed. They are currently working with all the cities and municipalities as well as stakeholders, deciding the best way to distribute that aid. And even Spokane itself initiated a program called the Business Resilience Loan Program, offering financial aid, offering loans to small businesses in the size of $5,000 to $10,000 type of loans. So there is help coming. It is going to be a process that will take a little bit of time, but I'm just simply trying to tell you that even though the numbers are devastating to look at, and the damage to many people losing their jobs has been devastating, this isn't a typical recession. This wasn't caused by instability in the financial system or anything else like that. This was a decision made on a medical basis, and the main point is, as we lift those restrictions, the economy will then have the opportunity to start regaining its footing and moving forward. So what I've just tried to emphasize there is when you've had these types of situations, you want to, you know, we can't do anything about the past. What we have to do, especially as leaders in the community, is focus on what's the steps we need to do going forward. Where are those opportunities? What are the things we can be looking at? So if we go to the next slide, what I would highlight from there, actually, I'll give you a little more information before I give you my conclusions. What I would say, another point that I would want to make to you, I didn't include it as a slide, but one of our roles as business people in the community or as leaders in the community is that, you know, we have a role as role models to be setting those kind of standards of making rational, objective decisions, focusing on what we need to do to move forward, to get the economy moving forward. So one of the challenges I throw out to all of you as leaders in the community, as business people in the community, what I've always said and what I've told my senior management as well is that there's a far worse virus that's spreading through the US than the actual COVID-19 virus, and that is the virus of fear. I would advocate to all of you that we once again as business people not be, even if you're fearful yourself and worried about what's going on, when we're talking to your customers, you know, what you're focusing on then is how can I help you? What are things we need to do? Because when we pull together as a community and we all focus on what's the work that needs to happen, what we'll be amazed at and what we're already amazed at is the progress we start to see. It's been amazing to see how many individuals as well as organizations have come together to find ways to raise funds to feed people who have lost their jobs and don't have the excess income to be able to live off of until they get their unemployment insurance. That's really one of the biggest things I would advocate for you, is that we can't change the past. We know what the news is going to be like for the next 2 or 3 months as we see this stuff coming out, because part of the problem with the economic data is at best it's a month delayed before we get information. So we're only just now starting to get March information, and we're almost at the end of April. So my biggest advocacy, this is something that our chairman of the bank, Pete Stanton, had recommended all employees, and I'll make the same recommendation to you. He said we need to all go on an information diet. And what he meant by that is while you're at home, there's a real tendency to have your TV on and be watching 24/7 news. The problem with 24/7 news is the way we keep your attention is to feed you negative news. Because human behavior, people are more attracted to negative news than positive news. We see that regularly. If there's something negative happen, it'll be covered for a week and even 2 weeks. If there's something positive happens, it might get an hour or two of coverage and then it's on to the next thing. So his advice to all employees was turn your TV off, spend time with your families, spend time with your customers, spend time outdoors, but stop watching the 27 news, because all you're going to be doing is be fed information about something that's already happened and can't be changed. And that's where I've highlighted here that be aware that we're only just now starting to get that bad information. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Just like we saw for that state initial jobless claims, the numbers spiked before they tipped over and they're coming back down again. So that's what we're going to see the same way. And I just really encourage you to focus people when they're talking about, oh my God, what's going to happen? You know, the fact that help is on the way, that we are seeing progress, and that it is something that, especially as long as we're all following the medical recommendations, we can make this time period shorter. If we all decide that we're going to ignore it and go back out and just do whatever we want, we're going to be looking at, instead of like a U-shaped recovery, it'll be more like a W-shape, when they have to respond again next fall of shutting things back down again because we let the virus spread even more. But in the meantime, you have customers out there that may be seeking assistance. We're seeing, as they said, at least they got the restrictions lifted for the real estate side, that you can at least conduct business with your clients, where at first you were shut down completely. I think it's going to be very important as well, now that we've reached an agreement, that we can start opening back up residential construction, because the bottom line is you can't sell homes if we're not building homes. So I think all of that is some of the stuff we need to focus on, the positives of saying progress may be slow, it may be frustrating, but it is occurring, and let's focus on the progress rather than on the damage.
Sounds great, Steve. In fact, this is a great spot. We'll be talking just a few minutes here about some of the new changes that the governor is announcing today for this. But before you go, I wanted to put you on the spot just a little bit to talk about what you see in your crystal ball, if you wouldn't mind, looking forward on how you see our local economy reacting to some of these efforts to start taking the wraps off of business and starting back to work.
Well, I think one of the realities we're going to look at is that no matter what they may wish for, this is not going to be a V-shaped recovery, because people have been impacted by this, and because we don't have a vaccine out there yet. I don't believe people, even if they said, hey, you guys can all open back up, I don't believe people are going to be willing to go back and sit in a crowded restaurant or a movie theater or an event or something. So I think it's going to be a gradual process. And I do believe that the governor and even the administration's recommendations for a phased reopening is the most common sense thing to do. But I do think that one of the challenges we're going to face, a lot of businesses, especially the leisure and hospitality side, are going to be facing a challenge that if you're told that the only way you can open back up is to have half capacity so that you can have social distancing, you may not be able to operate at those levels. You know, we're going to force businesses to look at ways to be more profitable. One of the biggest risks to that is that we see the food and beverage industry revert more and more to an automated process, and which that means then is permanent job losses, because you say, rather than having 3 food servers with half capacity, I'm going to have you walk up when you first come into the restaurant, order your food there, sit down, and I only need 1 person to deliver your food to you on a regular basis. So I think we have to watch for that. And that's where I talk about the fear side again. If we support the fear mentality, people are going to be more fearful about going out there. But I do think that we will see the recovery happening. I just think that I've told people that my best guess for the recovery is more of a square root recovery. You came down, you bounce up, and then you kind of go level or flatten out until you really find a cure for the flu, for the virus. And then people will be more willing to do more things with crowded spaces there. So I'm just saying, if you're hoping that it's just going to go back to normal, I think we may have discovered we have a new normal now. The one that scares me the most is because I travel as much as I do. We all remember after 9/11, we gave up some of our freedoms to have TSA make sure we're safe getting on a plane. The thing that I would dread, but I could see as a possibility, is now you're going to go through 2 checkpoints. First, you're going to go through the medical, where they check your temperature and they do the 15-minute test to make sure you don't have the virus. Then you got to go through TSA. And I think people will just start to adapt and say, well, do I really need to travel as much as I did before? This Zoom video conferencing seems to be working great. So I think that's what we're going to see, is new opportunities coming up. We may see some businesses closing. We may see other businesses popping up now, adapting to whatever the new world is that we're going to be in.
Steve, thank you much for sharing your images here from Washington Bank. And we look forward to seeing your newsletters. As always, you have great insight of what's happening with the economy. You'll have plenty to talk about, I'm guessing, in the weeks ahead. We have some good news to share here real quick before we tackle, and that is that the Sound Governor Jay Inslee decided to make a decision to allow residential construction to begin on a limited basis. There's a number of rules and regulations on how that can proceed. We're waiting to see for that. We haven't seen it yet, and we'll sure to be posting that on the Washington Realtor website. Also, NAR has a pretty good website that they've stood up as well, that it talks about how to keep financially secure using the CARES Act and some of the programs that are available. We'll have that website link for you available on the Spokane Association of Realtors. But not everything is down. Tom Clark, with a nice guest to talk about things that people are doing and how we're surviving here, right, Steve?
Hey, Darren, I'm going to go off script here a little bit. I see, is Joy Adams still here? Because we've got a lot of questions, and if she'd be willing to answer some questions, I'm more than happy to give up Mike's time and my time to get the members' questions answered. Joy, are you still here?
I am, Tom. How are you?
Oh, thank you for sticking around. I just,
Sure.
As you probably determined too, there's an awful lot more interest and concern about your topic than there is about any topic I might have been planning to talk about.
Sorry about that. We tend to walk in the room and take all the air out of the room these days. That's just kind of the way it goes.
No, I'm glad you stayed.
Yes, I've been
I think
answering
the
as many
members
questions as I can in the Q&A channel. Yeah. And I'm also capturing all the questions so that we can get you guys some good answers. But let me address a couple of the big things. And
You're on.
The questions that I've seen are, first off, yes, we absolutely need your 2019 tax year information. Now, what happens if you don't have that? You can file, and then when you do get your 2019 tax information, you can upload it later, okay? By filing now, we can get your payment set up at the minimum, which, as Susie said, is going to be around $835 if you're a full-time realtor. And then later on, when we have that information and can recalculate your benefit amount, we'll go back and pay back pay to plus up all the remaining weeks. There's a number of questions about exactly where you apply the commission that you receive. For instance, Luis Freitas asked if you enter the amount of the commission received the week it was received in and not when you show the property or wrote the contract. I need to take that question back and get a clear answer for everyone, because I'm not 100% sure how exactly the workflow of realtors applies in our situation. So I want to double check that answer before I get that back. Throughout here is filing weekly claims. Yes, please do. Every week, file your claim. The only way I can get a benefit to you for that particular week is if you file the claim for that week. Your initial application gets you into the system, but then each week you come back and let us know that you still need that benefit, any commissions you may have received that week, that sort of thing. And then we get your benefit out.
Well, a
If
lot of
you
messages we've
don't
received are from
have,
realtors who
yeah,
filled things out incorrectly, and now we're trying to go back into the system and make corrections, but really can't do that without talking to an officer. What recommendations might you have for that?
so that is something that we're doing a lot of work to clean up all the everyone's accounts on this one. And like Susie said, our phone lines are just absolutely inundated. One of the things that you can do, if you go on to eServices, there's a link once you're in your account to send a web notice. And what that does is that sends a secure email into the system and puts it in a queue to be worked. And that works just as well as a phone call. If you say, hey, you know what? I input my birth date wrong. It was 2 in the morning because I was following Susie's advice to do it in the middle of the night. And I fat fingered it and said I was born this year as opposed to the year I was actually born. Can that be changed? Absolutely, we can fix that, or any other information that is addressed that way. We will get to that and we'll make the fix. If it's holding up payment, we will do our best to get that move forward as quickly as we can. We are taking a number of measures right now to clear issues that are holding up payment, especially for those who have not received any payment from us. One other thing, Darren, that I'm seeing in here is people are saying that they've been denied or ineligible on their UI claim. I want to remind folks to take go back into eServices and take that next step to actually apply for the pandemic unemployment insurance past the UI claim, because the pandemic unemployment assistance is available to you if you cannot get regular unemployment. So we have to have you fail that first and be denied there first so that we can pay you the pandemic unemployment assistance. So it is a two-step process. Thankfully, that second
I think Susie had it, she said it best when she said it was like a
step
video game where
is
you have to go to
considerably
the
shorter
next
because we
level.
move over as much.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you applied before last weekend, you would not have seen that link because only last Saturday did we turn on the tech to make that link. So if you applied before last weekend, now's the time to go back in and take a look.
Joy, we're talking with realtors a lot about this process, and what folks are telling us is that the first mistake a lot of them make are they check the wrong box when it said, did you work 680 hours? The second one was a misconception that they can still be eligible if they're getting underpaid versus, because I mean there's a lot of folks that believe that because real estate is now back to being partially essential services that they're ineligible, but they've seen a dramatic drop in their wages. Can you help explain to folks that even though they have partial income that they're still eligible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the once
I
you
think
for pandemic unemployment assistance a week, and that's the answer that I owe you. If you had earnings that week, let's say you got $1,000 commission that week. I know I'm probably understating, but let's say you have $1,000 commission attributable this week. You would let us know that. For every dollar that you earn in a given week, we are going to deduct 75 cents off the base amount. Now that is not the 600. This is, if you take away the 600, what that base minimum or base amount is. Let's say you have a weekly benefit amount of $500. If you have $1,000 commission that week, then your deduction is going to take away basically your WBA for that week because of you apply piece of why we continue to have you apply every week. And you sent me a note that my mic kept dropping. Was that answer clear enough?
No.
Yeah.
In a word.
Unfortunately, we lost a big chunk of what you were saying
there?
there. Maybe we could try it again there.
Oh, here we go. Sorry. There's a complex here. Let me tell you what, I will type the answer into the chat window for everyone to see. So that my mic doesn't get in the way of that.
Sounds great. And the just an update for you. Just got one of our members just updated me to say that the phase 1 construction safety requirements have just been posted on the governor's website. So for those folks who are involved with any level of residential construction or repair, those things are going to be up there to talk about what can be done, when it can be done, and what rules now have to be followed as we reopen residential construction. Tom.
Darren, just for clarification on that, I've seen two different things. Are they saying that residential construction will be open back up on Monday, or can it open up as soon as they get approval on this 30-step process or whatever it is?
Just going through the document now, it doesn't, no specific see a date time on that.
Okay, no problem. The good news is they're making serious progress, or making very good forward progress with getting our residential construction business back in order, and that's going to help every one of us. And I'm pretty sure that includes home repair type construction as well as new construction.
Yeah, especially for realtors, that's really important when we get down to having those closing items or required things to be taken care of.
I think we can assume Joy's working in the background and answering the questions.
I'm back. Is my microphone behaving now?
You're good.
You're good.
Okay. Excellent. So I typed in the deduction question into the chat window just to make that easier. And there is also a question about deadlines set that cannot be met. I want to address that one too. We understand that both because we are so inundated with all manner of questions coming in and calls coming in, plus you all have all manner of crazy going on. We're offering a lot of grace when it comes to deadlines for filing, at least through unemployment insurance. Now, I can't necessarily speak for other state agencies, but if we're trying to get something, if you're trying to get something to us and we're trying to get it to you and it's just not working, don't worry too much about it being late. Just keep trying. Send us the web notice, send it through your account, and we will certainly take into account the fact that we have all been so busy that we're not going to be holding people, penalizing people for being late on that sort of thing. Darren, Tom, what other questions? Ed, have I hit the main points?
Yeah, there was the only couple other ones were just some confusion about, here in Spokane, we have a lot of realtors that actually work across state lines. So they've got income for Washington, they've got income for Idaho. How would you want them to treat that?
Okay, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance anyway. That's the only thing where state lines really matter. Because you live in Washington, if you live in Washington, then I want all the information about your income. I want your Washington and Idaho information. So we're looking at your net income for tax year 2019, and since you are cited out of Washington state, then you're eligible to apply here in Washington state. So.
And then there are those that have, what if someone has, say they're working more than one job? They have a W-2 job on one position, but they're also working, say, as a 1099 employee for realtor. How would you have them, how would that work for folks?
So that is part of why we have people apply for unemployment insurance first. The law says that if you're eligible for regular unemployment insurance, then we're going to pay regular unemployment insurance. If you're not eligible for regular unemployment insurance, then we take a look at your pandemic unemployment assistance application. So if you have a mix of W-2 job plus realtor, then you may qualify for a regular unemployment insurance claim, and we would be setting that up and getting it paid. But either way, go through the application process.
So if someone is an S Corp, do they file as self-employed or as an independent contractor?
You know, in truth, I don't think our system really differentiates between the two. So however you identify is fine with us.
The phone lines have really been one of the biggest questions we've gotten so far from people who are back channeling me here, that they've really had a hard time getting through. What's your thoughts about, I mean, do we just keep trying, wait till next week? What's your thoughts here?
You can keep trying. Our phone lines are open tomorrow. We have gone to having some Saturday hours to allow for that. We've also opened up a couple new phone lines specifically for if you have questions, if you have an issue with your claim, if a couple others that I think went live this morning, and honestly I haven't looked at the website to remember them. Those are out on our website. Take a look at those numbers and try the number that is most appropriate to your situation. The other thing that you can do is go on to eServices and get us a web notice. Again, sending in that secure email gets the question in there, and we are getting to the point where we can work those. But for context, we're getting, I mean, we have the capacity to answer during our peak time 2,000, 2,500 calls in a day. We're getting 30,000 calls in a day. That's part of the problem. So once we get through this initial hit from taking all the applications from the new benefits, we are hoping that things calm down and we can get caught up with callbacks and such like that.
One of the challenges we had was the issue of standby. Is that something realtors should even be considering, or should we set that aside? Okay.
Set it aside. Right now, since the main benefit of standby in normal times is that an employer stays connected to their employee, or an employee stays connected to their employer without being forced to go look for other work. Right now, we have broadly set aside work search. You can even answer no on that question right now in the weekly claim, and it will not affect your claim. Now, I say that with a heavy caveat that at some point in the future, we will turn that on. So please don't make it too much of a habit. But obviously right now, looking for a job is not something that we can force everybody to do. So I'm sorry, I just totally blanked on your question.
Just real quick, I think you answered it, but is there income limits on the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance?
Nope. There is a maximum weekly benefit that maxes out over about like $83,000. Over that, you're not going to be getting any more than the maximum weekly benefit, but there's no limit.
So Joy, if I understand correctly, this is not an event, it's a process. So, so that being said, if one of the, someone gets tripped up and they haven't been able to get online and they haven't been able to make their claim, the dates are not going to be critical. They can backdate, they can put correct dates in, and it'll all come out in the wash. It'll just take a little while longer. Yes. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if if you can't get your claim filed till next week or the week after, we are still going to pay you backdated to however far back. We can go back as far as March 29th or March 8th. I can't remember, depending on the situation. For the PUA, we actually could, if your income started to fall off in February because of COVID, let's say you actually got sick or something like that, we can probably pay back even as far as that. Sure. So, but go through the application and we will work that out.
And also, I want to point out that a lot of these questions, we have been working with the ASD on the state level, and Washington Realtors are hoping to have some guidance on that early next week. We're hoping to get out more realtor-specific information that will help. So thank you for helping us with that as well.
Absolutely.
Hey, is there anything particular that you have seen when it comes to realtors is there any other advice that you might be able to offer us up?
Not really. I applaud you guys for working through a system that isn't really set up for the way you work. I appreciate that. And really, we're just trying to inject some stability into the economy right now so that when we come out of this, that we're in a better position and don't have quite so far to climb back up.
Fantastic.
So to the extent we can be helpful, we're glad to do it.
Well, just know that we may invite you to come back and answer some questions as this time moves on. We should certainly have plenty of them from our members right now, and we'd love to be able to work through as many as possible. We do have an update now on the governor's plan. This is the residential construction is being limited, that it can start almost as soon as possible, but it is being limited to existing projects, not brand new startups. So that was something that just came out. And there is an extensive list of safety checklists that you have to complete to allow that to go on. And that's, again, that's just now been posted on the governor's website. Chance for you to take a look at that. Tom Clark, we're really well over our time, but any of the thoughts and questions before we continue here?
Oh, Joy, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much. And I know the members here do as well. And so we can let you go. And if you want to take care of those, if you did make notes on some of those questions and could send us a summary later, that would be terrific. Appreciate your time.
I will do my best. I've been doing copy and paste off of the chat window and the Q&A window, so hopefully I have them all.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate your time, and I know everybody else does too.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
You bet. Mr. Crowley, would you like to unmute yourself, sir?
Trying.
Hey, look.
I am.
There's Mike. So, Mike, for the benefit of the 102 members that are still hanging around here, when we set these up, it's a little bit difficult to know if we're going to have 15 minutes of content or 15 hours of content. So appreciate your patience on this. And you and I were kind of the backups in the event we didn't have enough interest to fill the 1 hour. Of course, we've already done that. But yeah. For the benefit of those folks that are still hanging around, we've only lost one since I said 102, so that's a good sign. Let's talk a little bit about real estate market changes. You've been in the business for a few years, as have I, and we've seen some ups and we've seen some downs, and I'm kind of curious what your take is of, if you were to give somebody some advice on survival tips in a changing market, what comes to mind?
A couple things, but just to piggyback on the conversation we just had, yesterday, the Washington Association of Realtors had an hour slideshow that answers almost every question that's popping up on the Zoom webinar chat. Mm-hmm. And I watched the whole show, and I just got an email from Washington Realtors that they don't have it available yet. But if you don't get a daily email from Washington Realtors, you can email me or email our office and figure out why, but it will be available. And it does answer almost every question that's popping up over here. So it was probably about an hour slideshow. It had demonstrations of everything, of where you check. So I'd encourage people to watch for that. Back to the market right now. I still think we're gonna have a strong market when this is over. I'm not seeing any indication of we won't. I showed houses today. The house came on the market yesterday. There were over 20 cards in there. We had 2 people ahead of us to look at it and 1 person behind. And it is hard to practice social distancing when you have cars piling up in the street. Fortunately, nobody was bringing kids along, so that was good. Nobody was bringing mom and pop along, so it helped with that it was just, and there was actually one realtor there. He and his wife were a couple, or he and his partner, I don't know if they're married, and they both stayed with one of the buyers. And so they both had their own little different report going on there. I don't know if that's a good idea to have 2 realtors there or not, but it helped one of them sit outside and chat with one spouse while the other one went inside and showed the house. It was kind of a team effort there, good or bad. But there was one other thing. Oh, we were talking about free classes. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but people listening, the classes between now and the end of May that we are doing Zoom online. And I know next week, the guy from Madison, who's the broker from Madison that
Eric
teaches
Bissett. Eric Bissett.
a class next week, I think. It's a free clock hour class for you guys. So I'd encourage you to do that. This is a great time. There's free. I'm taking my core class the first day of May, I think, through the Washington Association of Realtors for free. This is just a time that we don't always have time to gather as much information as we want. And this is a time where we have so much information coming at us. Take the time to grab it, whether it be for education, to make applying for a loan easier. This is just, it's a reset button for some of our real estate businesses. Take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The ePro is available, I believe, also at NAR, as well as the Commit to Excellence, C2EX.
But nobody knows what C2X is, but it's kind of a long process. What would you say? It takes 20, 30 hours to complete it?
Well, if I could finish it ever, I'd be able to tell you, but I've only spent about 2 or 3 hours on it, and I don't think I'm that far along. I think I've done like 2 or 3 modules, and there's 20 of them or something.
And the
So it's a pretty say again?
Yeah, it's also, I think, going to make you eligible for your code of ethics requirement.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. That was one of the things they wanted, because they want people to go away from the standard code of ethics class. But that's free education. You can go online to do it. Also, if your clients haven't been pre-qualified in the last 2 months, if you want to make contact with your clients, that's a really good excuse to do it. Standards, I think credit scores have gone up 620 to 680 for some loans. And I heard the other day, maybe it was Chase Bank is only doing 20% conventional loans now. So if you don't think anything's changed for your buyers, they think they're just furloughed. If you are furloughed, you're not getting a loan now. And a lot of people out there seem to think that they're furloughed and still can go look at houses. So I'm trying not to show houses. I wish I could take, if we had people could raise their hands here, I bet half of the people out there, I don't want to show houses. If I get sick and I've been showing houses, the requirements that we have to go through will not be pleasant. So I'm willing to show houses. I just don't. And I don't know how many people out there are excited to show houses, but it's different. And I think half the people out there looking at houses probably aren't as qualified as I think right now. So I don't know if I had anything else. Buyers pre-qualifying. The National Association of Realtors, and Darren actually mentioned it. There's a video on NAR that will help you. If you guys haven't seen that video that NAR has to help you qualify if you're doing the small business loans, you could also email me and I'll send it to you. And Darren's probably seen it also. But they have a video to help you for that care loan. And I don't know if all realtors are eligible for that, but that's like, I know some realtors that have $10,000 put in their bank this week.
Right.
And it's pay themselves. So they set it up so they are getting a salary from themselves. And as long as they're paying themselves a reasonable salary, that loan is supposed to be forgiven. Do I think people are going to get in trouble with it? Absolutely. But I do know some good business people out there that have qualified and received it, and they are paying themselves a salary. Right. So if you need a video on that, you can always send me an email. And I think, like I said, Darren probably has access to it also.
All right. Well, Mike, I can see you've got some cartoons going on in the background that you're probably getting caught up with. So we can let you go. But I did want to go back and reiterate, NAR, WAR, Washington Realtors, and SAR all are offering free classes. All of our Zoom classes for the next month and a half for SAR are free for the taking. So that was just passed by the board of directors the other day as well. So there's lots of opportunities for people to sharpen their axe and to get a little bit sharper as we go through this. And when we hit the streets running, we can hit them running with a little bit more education and a little bit more capability. The showing protocols are critical. I still get phone calls, texts almost every day from realtors that pull up to their listing and there's 2 or 3 people in the house. There was one where they were sitting on the couch and visiting in the living room while realtors were stacking up in the driveway or in the street. So be courteous of one another and follow the protocols. We don't want to lose the abilities that we've been given, and we also want to make sure and keep safety for ourselves, safety for our families, and safety for each other as primary in our minds. And so let's all be safe. Let's all cooperate. It's called the Spokane Association of Realtors. We're an association. We're a group of cooperative competitors, although I hate to use the term competitor, but let's do cooperation instead of compete. This is a big deal. And thank you very much for all of your attention. I think we've probably expanded our audience's grace period often long enough. So thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot again. This is being recorded, so hopefully you didn't say anything you didn't mean to have go out in public.